One of the interesting things about entertainment in general is that we have these kind of dedicated silos. We have movie makers over here making movies, us here making games, people over there doing music, the television producers down there. They're very separate, and they're thought of in very separate ways. When you look at science, all the really interesting work in the known, the kind of established genres of science really is starting to happen at the intersections between these sciences, the interdisciplinary areas. And I think the same thing is true in entertainment. I think we're just now hitting the point of what I would call interdisciplinary entertainment, where the interesting stuff is at the intersections between these established fields. Now, if you think about, within any entertainment process, whatever industry you're in, it's pretty much a very similar process kind of within a large corporation of how you create entertainment. It's something like this, there's some big, company headquarters. In there, somewhere, there's some people looking at, bar charts and whatever and saying, oh, this is the next big thing, let's, task it to our production teams to make this, whether it's a first-person shooter or the next action blockbuster or romantic comedy. So it gets pressed down to the creative, actually not quite the creatives yet, but really the mid-tier managers, which now sit around in a room and say, okay, what are we going to do? We're going to push it down to the next level, which is the creative guys, and get some ideas. And so they come up with some ideas. These guys, give it a thumbs up or thumbs down. Frequently, they have to kind of put their stamp on it. So they do, thumbs down until they get something that they like. Creatives have to kind of go back to the drawing board, redevelop their concept, and until they finally get a thumbs up from the middle managers, right? At which point, these lower levels bring it down to like the designer, which would be my level. And now the designer is given this concept, okay? Now how am I going to turn this into entertainment? And at which point, the designer will typically kind of imagine all the different directions you can take that concept. And so from this point, the designer would hand it off to the engineers, who would then spec out all these kind of elaborate approaches to do it. And then you would start building these very clunky prototypes. And after building some clunky prototypes, you'd start doing user testing. And probably the initial user testing is not going to go that well. So you send it back to the engineers, they build maybe a little bit more refined prototypes, and then drop it back to user testing. At which point you decide, okay, that looks good, let's put it on a disk. At that point, it pretty much gets, sent off to Amazon, whatever, put in a box, sent in a truck, off to Walmart. Somebody takes this cheap piece of media, puts it into some expensive electronic thing, experiences it coming into their brain. Certain brain patterns arise as they are playing a game, watching a movie, whatever. And within their brain, it's actually releasing this kind of elaborate cocktail of hormones, endorphins, and neurotransmitters. So, that's actually, no matter what entertainment field we're in, this is what we sell, these endorphins. So in fact, I am a drug dealer. So there's this major disconnect, kind of between the process of us creating entertainment, no matter what field we're in, and the actual end user experience. Now, looking at the entertainment landscape, I just did some kind of back-of-the-envelope calculations to get a sense of how big different entertainment fields were. The two largest ones, and take these with a grain of salt, these are very, very rough. These are worldwide, over 1 year. Sports brings in about $400 billion, in all its different forms. The internet's several hundred billion, depending on how you measure it. Those are really the two largest points I found. Second tier, we really come down to pornography, gambling, and TV, which is a little surprising, but maybe not too much. Then we have third tier, and so forth, so on. And I started building this map, of what I saw the landscape of the entertainment industry was kind of by value. Now, they're organized like this because I kind of put some very rough points in here where story is kind of the upper right here, kind of more interactive play experiences are in the bottom, and things that I couldn't really categorize more experiential, more heuristic in the upper left. These are very, very rough categories. But just the way I was thinking about this was that within this, I think that there are currents. When somebody comes up with an idea, an IP, a franchise, whatever, it'll tend to kind of jump from one format to another in certain interesting ways. You can take one thing like sports, for instance, and say, what are the primary flows from sports? Where is it monetized after that, most directly? Then there's secondary flows. And that kind of explains why something like movies, which doesn't seem that large, on the bottom line here, actually is pretty much upstream of a lot of these other formats. So in fact, there are a lot of flows that move out from movies. You can monetize in all these different ways. And so I think as an entertainment designer, this is kind of the palette that we're painting in. And we kind of have to understand the flows and currents within this to get a sense of how we do things that are more cross-disciplinary. There are other kind of networks as well, platforms. And this is something that I think has been a big theme this year, is that we're seeing platforms explode in interactive entertainment. And it's throwing our industry kind of into disarray, according to some people. But in some sense, we're actually operating on many, many different networks. And they kind of interact in interesting ways. We have the technology networks that we're using, underneath a lot of what we do, which give rise to the platforms. They're usually connected to the technology networks. Then formats on top of that, which are actually the art forms, the entertainment forms that we're working in. Eventually those go to our brain networks and cause certain patterns, certain experiences that we can have. And those experiences that we have actually flow outward into social networks. And so television, for example, we have certain technology networks that we kind of are able to broadcast television with, onto certain types of platforms. We do certain types of entertainment, formats with those networks. They cause certain experiences in our brain, and then we might, share those experiences, and they have certain social dynamics around them as well. So as designers, we're in some sense working across all of these networks. Now, it used to be that we were, fairly specific in terms of a format, versus its kind of platform. If you take a movie, it used to be that you go see a movie in a movie theater, and it was distributed to that theater on film. Then television came around, and we started having the ability to broadcast a movie into your television set. Then we had color television, cable, video cassettes, then computers, CDs. Basically, these are all platforms that I can distribute a movie on now, and we have new ones coming online all the time. So now it's all 3D. But now, if you think about all the different kind of platforms that you can enjoy a movie on, you'd be hard pressed to list them all. Whereas it used to just be one platform. So there's been an explosion of platforms just for this one art form. And we're starting to see new platforms come online all the day. All these things that we never would have thought of the telephone or even the car as an entertainment platform are evolving into entertainment platforms before our very eyes. Entertainment is just like spreading everywhere. Almost, there's nowhere you can go where you don't have the ability to watch a movie. Even things like in our homes, the Roomba, which is supposed to vacuum your floor, but it didn't vacuum worth shit, right? Really it's more of an entertainment platform. For a lot of people, they get the Roomba and it's kind of like a pet and hangs out with them. A lot of people kind of decorate them and their pets play with them. It's an entertainment device, marketed under the excuse of being a vacuum cleaner. So we're getting entertainment devices, they're becoming just totally ubiquitous around us all the time. Even our pets are becoming entertainment platforms. I don't know if you all saw Up, but the little dog collars that make the dogs talk in English actually exist. You can buy them. They've even got the G-rated version and the X-rated version, depending on your preference. I think this, in our industry kind of started, back with the Wii fairly recently. This kind of shift away from the path that we have been going down, that we have this, super powerful machine in our living room, super high-res graphics, and more buttons on the controller every year. For the first time, we were jumping the generational divide. We had, people in retirement homes playing bowling on the Wii because it was an approachable platform, it was very different, and it was focused in a very different way. About 500 million years ago, there was this thing called the Cambrian explosion on Earth in evolution. There were these very established life forms that have been around for, hundreds of millions of years. And they're not quite sure what triggered it, but almost overnight, over about 50 million years, this explosion of life forms, most of the life that we now see on Earth, first arose back in the Cambrian explosion. And in some sense, I think that's kind of exactly where we are right now in the game industry. I think we had this kind of established trajectory we were on. And now if you just look at the sub-communities in the game industry that have grown up over the last 5 years or so, it's tremendous, the diversity. There's an explosion, not just of platforms, technology, but also of different sub-communities applying games in totally different directions that we probably would not have seen 10 years ago.